SSB Updates. I am Moeva Garcia. Today, I have with me none other than the Chief Executive Officer of the Social Security Board, Dr. Colin Young, to share important updates on the recently approved contribution reform. Let's hear from Dr. Young. What exactly is the contribution reform?
The contribution reform refers to the changes that we're making to the legislation as it relates to the payment of contributions for employees who are working for more than 8 hours in any given week. That contribution schedule is in our legislation and has remained the same since 2003.
Wow.
And so what we have been doing over the last 2 years is going all over the country. We're talking to persons in the private sector, in the government of Belize, in the unions, to impress upon them the need for us to increase the contributions, because it's absolutely essential for the sustainability of the fund. 16 years is a long time for the contributions to stay the same. In fact, SSB is one of the very few organizations, social security organizations, that has frozen the contribution schedule. So over the last 2 years, we've been engaging with our partners, and we made an initial proposal to increase the rate in contributions from 8% to 10%, and the ceiling from 300 to 520. That initial proposal was rejected by the partners, and as a result, we had to go back and re-engage them again. And this time we were successful. And what essentially the reform that was approved has to do with phasing in over 3 years the rate of contribution, as well as phasing the ceiling also over 3 years. After extensive consultations with all of the partners, I am very pleased to report that we reached consensus on that proposal. Last week, we presented that to the government of Belize, and the cabinet agreed with the proposal as negotiated between SSB and the social partners.
When are these changes actually taking place?
Because the changes are going to occur over 3 years, we will be seeing each year from now some changes occurring. The first set of changes will occur on July 1st, 2019. What that means is that the rate is going to go from what it is today, 8% to 8.5%, effective July 1st, and the ceiling is going to go from 320 to 440. Next year, starting in January, we're going to phase in another 0.5% in the rate, and the ceiling is going to go from 440 to 480. In 2021, on January 4th, the rate is going to increase again from 9% to 10%, and then the ceiling is going to go from 480 to 520. At that time, we would have arrived at a 10% contribution rate and a ceiling of 520, which is what the actuary always recommended that we reached. However, the social partners didn't want to incur the expenses for a one jump in the rate nor the ceiling. So this was a compromise solution that we arrived at with the partners, and I'm very delighted that the government of Belize accepted the proposal that was negotiated between us and the social partners.
Can you elaborate on how the contribution reform will benefit the contributors?
That's a very good question. In fact, I think the reason why the union or labor supported the increase was not only is it essential for the sustainability of the fund, but also when the ceiling increases, their benefits also increase. You can imagine that in 2001, the maximum sickness benefit that a person would qualify for was $256. Why? Because the sickness benefit is calculated based 80% of the insurable earning that you make. And if it's 320, then 80% of 320 is 256. Fast forward now to 2019, the maximum sickness benefit that you would qualify for is still $256.
Wow.
So the purchasing power of $256 today versus in 2001 is clearly different. And so this is an important part of what Social Security is to provide. The adequacy of the benefit should be enough that persons who are unable to work and are sick, that they can make do. So under this proposal, your sickness benefit then tracks the increase in the ceiling. So right now it's 80% of 320. In 2019 it's going to be 80% of 440. And then in 2020 it's going to be 80% of 480. And in 2021, 80% of 520. That means then that your sickness benefit, the maximum sickness benefit, if you're making that amount of money or more, will now go from $256 a week to $416 a week. The other side of this is the pensions. Your pension rate also increases with the ceiling. And right now your maximum pension rate, if you work for 35 years and contributed to the fund, your pension is calculated on the 3 best years over the last 15 years and the total number of contributions. Essentially what that means for the listening public is that if you were at the top of the pension rate, today you would be collecting a maximum weekly benefit, retirement benefit of $192 a week. That equates to about $10,000 a year. Under this proposal, in 2021, when you've arrived at the ceiling, your pension rate goes up from $192 per week to $312 per week.
That's amazing.
And your yearly benefit goes from about $10,000 to $16,200. So a significant increase in your pension rate. That is why I believe that the unions, having looked at the situation of SSB, recognize the importance, but also that many of the workers will benefit from these increases. So it's an increase in rates. Employers will have to pay more, employees will have to pay more. But for those above the ceiling, there's also an increase in the benefit that will be paid.
So I think it's safe to say that this is an investment for their future.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm really glad that you framed it that way, because that is what we're saying to workers. The money that you pay into Social Security ought not to be viewed as a tax.
Yeah.
Why? Because you get it back, and you get it back relatively quickly. Just so that people could understand, you take a public officer, any worker who works for 35 years, they would have paid a maximum of $30,000 into the fund. Their annual pension is $10,000. After 3 years, they collect all of that money back.
Definitely a huge investment. Well, Dr. Young, I'd like to say thank you very much for being here and for taking the time out to share these very important updates with our viewers. Okay?
Thank you very much.
To our viewers, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week Tuesday as we go live on Facebook with more information on the contribution reform and other important updates on Social Security.